Welcome to Horror Drift Stories. Before we start, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. If you're drawn to quiet, shadowy stories, make sure to subscribe. And a small note, you might hear a few ads early on, but after 10 minutes, it's just the story, uninterrupted. Now, get comfortable, let the night take over, and let's drift into the darkness. Story 1. Davy once asked me a question that sounded like a joke at the time. Would you rather burn forever or freeze forever? I laughed and leaned back on the couch, not taking it seriously at all. I'll answer that when hell freezes over, I said. We both laughed louder than we should have. The sound echoed through my living room, filling up the quiet space like it didn't belong there. We were lying on my small blue couch, the one I kept pushed up against a plain brick wall. The rest of the room didn't match that wall at all. Every other surface was painted with bright Star Wars scenes, ships flying across galaxies, lightsabers glowing in the dark. It was messy, but it felt like home. Davy stretched his arms and stood up, running his hand through his hair and slicking it back like he was trying to look cool. Live long and prosper, he said, doing his best impression. Peace and long life, dork, I replied, rolling my eyes. He smirked and walked toward the door, stepping out into the cold air without another word. Watching him leave always made me think about the first day we met. It was winter, years ago, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel still. I saw him sitting alone on a red swing set outside our high school. He wasn't moving, just staring down at the wood chips like they were the most interesting thing in the world. He looked empty, like he was trying to disappear without actually leaving. I walked over slowly. "Hey, is it okay if I sit here?" I asked. He looked up quickly like I had startled him. Yeah. Oh, okay. Sure. Go ahead." His voice shook like he wasn't used to talking to anyone. I sat beside him, and for a long time, we just swung in silence. The chains creaked softly, back and forth, back and forth. Then a voice cut through the quiet. "Hey, it's Davy. Man, you're hard to find, Davy Jones. Arg, arg, arg." I turned and saw him. A tall guy, easily 6 feet, built like he spent all his time lifting weights. He wore a torn leather jacket and faded jeans, and he walked toward us like he owned the place. He stepped off the concrete and onto the playground, each step slow and deliberate. "Davy, Davy, Davy," he said, shaking his head. "You're not supposed to have friends. Except me, of course. Remember our little agreement?" "How was that an agreement?" The guy smirked. "It isn't anymore. You broke it. And now there are consequences." He took another step closer. I wanted to move. I wanted to stand up and say something, but my body wouldn't listen. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. He stopped right in front of Davy, his hand clenched into a fist. And then, everything happened at once. I don't remember deciding to act. I just did. I pushed Davy's swing forward as hard as I could. The chains snapped tight, and the seat slammed straight into the bully's chest. He flew backward, arms flailing, like something out of a movie. Then he hit the ground, hard. The sound was deep and heavy, like thunder breaking through silence. Davy jumped off his swing. "Oh my God, is he okay?" The guy wasn't moving. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. I ran over and knelt beside him. "Let me check." I pressed my fingers against his wrist. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. "Check again," Davy said, his voice shaking. I checked his neck, his wrist again, over and over. There was no pulse, no movement, just cold skin. I think he's dead, I said, barely able to get the words out. Davy stepped back, panic filling his face. What did you do? What did you do? I didn't mean to, I said quickly. I was just trying to stop him. He stared at me for a long moment, breathing hard. Then something in him changed. He calmed down. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, you were protecting me, right? It was self-defense. Yeah, self-defense. We have to move, now. I know a place, deep in the woods. No one will find him there. I didn't argue. We grabbed the body, lifting him together. I took the shoulders, Davy took the legs. Then we walked. We left the playground behind and entered the forest, where the snow was thick and untouched. The trees stood tall around us, silent and still, like they were watching. The wind howled through the branches, cold and sharp. After a while, everything started to look the same. Are we lost? I asked. This all looks identical. No, Davy said. We're close. We climbed uphill, our legs burning as we pushed through the deep snow. Eventually, we reached the top. The forest opened up, and the ground flattened out. There was a strange clearing there. Davy pointed to the side. Dump him in there, he said. There was a large hole in the ground, a perfect circle, deep and dark, like the earth had been carved out. It looked unnatural. We threw the body in. I didn't look down for long. We made our way back the same path, stepping into the marks we had already made in the snow. How do you even know this place is safe? I asked. Davy shrugged. My dad used to bring me here. He loved exploring abandoned places. This spot, it doesn't exist on any map. No one comes here. Not in winter, not in summer. I didn't feel reassured, but I nodded anyway. The next few days felt strange. We went back to normal life, but nothing really felt normal. Then the news came. A 16-year-old boy from our school was missing. Seeing his face on TV made my stomach drop. I felt guilty, really guilty, relieved we weren't caught, but guilty. He was a terrible person, sure, but he didn't deserve to die like that. Days passed. Then, one night, everything changed. The front door burst open. It slammed into me before I even had time to react. I was thrown across the room, my back hitting the brick wall hard enough to knock the air out of me. Pain shot through my body. Then, everything went black. When I woke up, my vision was blurry. I blinked, trying to focus. The first thing I noticed was the walls. Dirt. All around me. My heart started racing. I pushed myself up and turned around. And there it was. The body. Or what was left of it. Just bones now. Still wearing the same leather jacket. The same jeans. I felt sick. Then I heard a voice. From above. Thank you for helping me that day, Davy said. I looked up, panic rising. Davy, what is this? Get me out. But some people shouldn't be saved, he continued, calmly. We didn't mean to kill him, but someone has to pay for it. Are you insane? I shouted. Let me out. He ignored me. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. Then something fell. A shovel full of dirt. It hit my face, choking me, filling my mouth and nose. More followed. I started screaming, Stop. Davy, please. But he kept going. More dirt, more weight. You chose, he said. Now it's my turn. The hole grew darker as the opening above began to close. I clawed at the walls, trying to climb, but they crumbled in my hands. The dirt kept falling, faster now. I could barely breathe. My chest burned as panic took over. Then I heard him, one last time. Reality may be cold, he said quietly, but where you're going, it's much warmer. The last bit of light disappeared, and then there was nothing but darkness, and the slow crushing weight of the earth above me. Story 2. It was Tuesday, at least I think it was. But honestly, days didn't matter anymore. They had stopped meaning anything to me a long time ago. My life had been reduced to just 2 states, working until my body gave out and trying to recover just enough to do it all over again. That night, I was failing badly at the second part. I woke up, slumped in my old leather armchair. My neck was bent at a strange angle, and the moment I tried to move, a dull, deep ache spread through it. It felt like something had been twisted too far and left that way for too long. I groaned and slowly lifted my head. The TV was still on, muted, casting a pale blue glow across the room. It made everything look cold and lifeless, like I was sitting inside a hospital room instead of my own apartment. The air smelled terrible. Cold coffee, days old, mixed with the sharp chemical scent of degreaser. It clung to everything. My clothes, my skin, even my breath. My eyes burned like I hadn't slept in days. Maybe I hadn't. I honestly couldn't remember. I turned my head and looked at the microwave clock. 8:54 p.m. I had only slept for about 40 minutes. Just enough to feel worse than before. Then, my phone started vibrating on the table beside me. The sound was harsh and mechanical, like a drill cutting through wood. It made my head throb even more. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Greg, my supervisor. Greg never called at night unless something had gone wrong. He didn't check in. He didn't care how you were doing. If he was calling, it meant he needed something. I let it ring a few times. My arm felt heavy, like lifting it would take more effort than I had left. Eventually, I picked it up. "Yeah, Greg?" I said. My voice sounded dry and rough. "Hey, you awake?" "Kid, it's 9 o'clock," he said loudly like he always did. I could almost imagine the smell of his cheap cigars through the phone. "Listen, I got a problem. You know that distribution center off Route 4? The one behind the old coal plant?" I stared at the TV for a moment, trying to think. Route 4. Middle of nowhere. Far from everything. I was sleeping, I muttered. "Yeah, I know the place. What about it?" "The night guy, Miller, just quit," Greg said. "Didn't even call. Just sent a text saying he's done. Left the keys in the drop box." That didn't make sense. Miller wasn't the type to just quit. "We've got an inspection at 6 in the morning, Greg continued. "If that floor isn't perfect, we lose the contract. I need you to go there now." Every part of me wanted to say no. My back hurt. My eyes burned. My whole body felt like it was shutting down. But Greg knew exactly how to convince me. "I'll pay you triple. Cash. And if it goes well, you get the rest of the week off." Paid. That stopped me. Triple pay. A few days off. I thought about my bills, my debt, everything piling up. I hadn't had a real break in weeks. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll go." The drive felt long and empty. Once I left the city, the lights started disappearing, one by one, until there was nothing left but darkness. My headlights lit up a narrow strip of road ahead of me, but beyond that, there was nothing, just black. I passed a few gas stations along the way, their neon signs flickering in the distance. But soon, even those disappeared. It was just me, the road, and the sound of my old car struggling to keep going. I kept thinking about Miller. 3 years working together, never late, never complained. And then suddenly, gone. Just like that. Something about it didn't sit right with me. When I finally reached the warehouse, it looked worse than I remembered. A huge concrete building sitting in the middle of nowhere. A single light flickered above the loading dock, casting a weak yellow glow. I found the key in the drop box, just like Greg said. Inside, the place was completely dark. I flipped the breakers, and one by one the lights came on. They flickered at first, then settled into a harsh white glow. The space was massive. Empty racks stretched out in every direction, disappearing into the distance. The cleaning machine was waiting in the back. Old, worn down, heavy. I filled it with water and poured in the degreaser. The smell hit me instantly, sharp and strong. I opened a side door to let some air in, then plugged in the extension cord and started the machine. The vibrations ran through my hands and arms, up into my shoulders. The sound of the motor filled the empty warehouse. At first, everything was normal. I moved in straight lines, back and forth, cleaning the floor. The dirt and grease slowly lifted, turning into gray water that the machine sucked up. Time passed. I didn't check how much. Eventually, my back started to give out. I turned off the machine and went to empty the tank. The silence that followed felt wrong. Too quiet. I looked out across the warehouse. That's when I saw something. A movement. Quick. In one of the aisles. I turned my head fast. Nothing. Hello. I called out. My voice echoed. No answer. I shook my head. You're just tired, I told myself. I went back to the machine. Then suddenly, everything went dark. The lights shut off. The machine stopped. The darkness was heavy, like it had weight. I stood there, frozen. Maybe the power went out. Old wiring. Too much load. That made sense. I knelt down and unplugged the machine just to be safe. I'll call Greg, I thought. I started walking toward the open door. I could see the outside, the gravel, the trees. Then I heard it. The machine. It was running again. I turned around slowly. It was moving. By itself. No, not by itself. Someone was behind it. A dark shape, hunched over the handles. Hey, I shouted. No response. The machine kept moving toward me. I stepped back and tripped over the cord. I looked down. It was unplugged, completely unplugged. My heart started racing. I ran for the door. I could see it. I was almost there. Then something hit me. Hard. I fell back onto the wet floor. I looked up, confused. There was nothing there. The door was open, but I couldn't get through. It was like something invisible was blocking me. I tried again. Same thing. I hit something I couldn't see. Why can't I get out? I shouted. I stepped back, ready to run through it again. Then the lights came back on. But they weren't the same. They were orange. Dark, dirty. Everything looked older. Broken. The racks were rusted. Dust covered everything. The air felt heavy. I walked slowly toward the center. The machine was there, but it was destroyed, burned, melted, like it had been through intense heat. And next to it, a body. I took another step and froze. It was me. my clothes, my face, frozen in fear. The lights flickered again. I looked out across the warehouse. There were more machines, rows and rows, all burned, and next to each one, a body. All of them me, some fresh, some just bones. Then it hit me. Like lightning, pain filled my head. Everything went white, then black. I woke up, back in my chair, the TV still glowing. I was sweating, breathing hard. Just a dream, I whispered. I'm just tired. I wiped my face. Then my phone started vibrating. I looked at the time, 8:54 p.m. My heart dropped. The screen lit up. Greg, I answered slowly. Yeah? Hey, you awake? Kid, it's 9 o'clock, Greg said. I stared ahead. I was sleeping. I said quietly, I think I was having a weird dream. And deep down, I already knew I was going back. Story 3. This is the most terrifying experience of my life. And even now, I still don't fully understand how I managed to get out of it alive. This happened when I was 22 years old. I had just started a new job as a cab driver. My shift was from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. At the time, I was actually happy with the schedule. Night shifts meant fewer passengers, less traffic, and the company paid extra for night duty. It felt like easy money. The first few days were completely normal. On my first night, I only got 2 or 3 customers. The roads were quiet, the rides were short, and everything felt manageable. Even on the second and third days, nothing unusual happened. I started getting comfortable with the routine. But on the 4th night, something happened that changed everything. Around 12:30 a.m., I got a call from the station. They told me to pick up a customer from a bus stand near Rose Valley Cafe. It's a local spot in my area. The location was about 5 kilometers away from where I was, and the drop-off point was another 6 kilometers in the opposite direction. I even asked them if there wasn't any other cab closer, because it felt like a long drive just for one passenger. But they told me no one else was available. So I agreed. Before ending the call, the guy at the station said something that actually made me feel good. This will be your last ride of the day. That meant I could finish early and go home. I remember smiling to myself. I started driving toward the pickup location. The roads were empty. I had some soft jazz music playing in the background. Everything felt calm and normal. After driving for about 2 kilometers, I noticed someone walking on the side of the road. As I got closer, he raised his hand, signaling me to stop. I slowed down and told him the cab was already booked. He replied, "Actually, I booked the cab." He stepped into the headlights, and that's when I saw his face clearly. He looked pale, not like someone who was sick. It was different. It was like all the color had been drained from his face. His skin looked unnatural. I asked him for the OTP, like we're supposed to do for verification. But instead of answering, he froze, completely still. His eyes widened, and he didn't blink for a few seconds. That moment made me uncomfortable. It felt off. I didn't know why, but something about him didn't feel right. Then suddenly, just like that, he went back to normal. He gave me the OTP. It was correct. That confused me, but at the same time, it reassured me enough to continue. I unlocked the door, and he sat in the back seat. "Please move," he said. His voice was low. I started driving again. That's when I realized something strange. I had picked him up right next to a graveyard. I don't know how I didn't notice it before. The place was clearly visible now. It made no sense that I had missed it earlier. Still, I ignored it. Night shifts can mess with your focus. I told myself it was nothing and kept driving. The man in the back seat didn't say a single word. I know many passengers stay quiet, especially at night. But even then, there's usually some small interaction, a destination confirmation, a short comment, something. This guy was completely silent. After about 20 minutes of driving, I started noticing something really strange. The road looked the same. The fields on the side looked the same. And then I saw a tall tree on the side of the road. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I saw it again and again. When I saw that exact same tree for the 6th time, I felt something cold run through my body. I knew something was wrong. I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady, "Sir, do you feel like we've been in the same place for a long time?" No response. I checked the rearview mirror. He was just sitting there, staring straight ahead, not reacting at all. Then suddenly, everything changed. The open road disappeared. We were inside a forest. It didn't happen gradually. It was just different. One moment it was a normal road, and the next moment there were trees everywhere. That made no sense. There is no forest on that route. I had driven that road before. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe I took a wrong turn. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. That's what I kept telling myself. Then suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I froze. My entire body went stiff. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. Slowly, I turned my head just enough to look. It was him. I forced myself to stay calm and asked, "Yes, sir?" In a very low voice, he said, "Are you ready?" I didn't understand. "For what?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just smiled. That smile, it wasn't normal. It didn't feel human. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was the station. I picked it up and said, "Cab 21. I picked up the customer from Rose Valley bus stand, and I'm on the way." There was a pause, but not a normal pause. It felt like the person on the other end was trying to process something. Then he said slowly, "Repeat that. From where did you pick him?" I felt confused. "Near the bus stand, Rose Valley side." Another pause. This one was longer. I could hear background noise, like he was asking someone else something. Then he came back on the call, but his voice had changed. "Where exactly are you right now?" I looked around. Trees, darkness, no lights, no signboards. I don't know. Somewhere on the route. Why? Then, he said something that made my chest tighten instantly. "The customer is still here." For a second, I thought I heard it wrong. I even let out a nervous laugh. "What?" "No, he's in my cab right now. I took the OTP and..." He cut me off. "No, listen carefully. The customer is standing here at the bus stand. He's been calling us for the last 10 minutes, asking where you are." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Slowly, my eyes moved toward the rearview mirror. But I didn't fully look yet. I whispered, "Then, who is in my car?" There was silence, only static. Then his voice came back, low, serious. "Don't react. Don't look at it directly." My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it. "Tell me, did he approach you first?" I already knew the answer. Yes. Then I heard him whisper, "Shit." There was movement on his side. It sounded like people were getting involved. Then he came back, louder this time. "Listen carefully. You need to leave the car. Right now. I froze. What? Are you serious? I'm in the middle of nowhere. Leave the car. Open the door and run. Don't wait. Don't argue. Don't look back. Just run. My throat went dry. What is that thing? I asked. He didn't answer directly. He said something else. If it spoke to you, you don't have much time. At that exact moment, something shifted behind me. I slowly looked into the rearview mirror, and what I saw was not the same person anymore. Its face looked stretched. The smile was too wide. Its body looked smaller, twisted in a strange way. Long white hair covered parts of its face. Then I saw its legs. They were bent backwards. I didn't think. I slammed the brakes, opened the door, and ran. Behind me, it screamed. Not like a human. It was something else. I ran straight into the forest and hid behind a big tree. My breathing was heavy, and I was trying to stay as quiet as possible. I could hear it moving. Slow footsteps. Searching. I peeked slightly. I saw it. It had long, sharp nails. Its body kept shifting, like it couldn't stay in one shape for too long. The footsteps got closer. I crouched lower in the bushes, barely breathing. It came so close that I was sure it would find me. But then, it moved away. That was my chance. I ran back to the car as fast as I could, jumped inside, locked all the doors, and started the engine. It saw me. It ran toward the car and started hitting the window again and again. The glass cracked, then shattered. But I didn't stop. I drove as fast as I could. For a few seconds, I could still see it in the rearview mirror, chasing me. Then, it disappeared into the darkness. I somehow made it out. The next day, I went back to that same road with 2 other drivers. There was no forest, no graveyard, nothing, just a normal empty road. I quit that job the same day. Story 4. I live in a fairly large city, just outside of Houston. It's like any typical suburb you can imagine. Every fast food chain is there. Every grocery store, every big-name franchise you've ever seen. In the winter, it gets a little cold, but in the summer, the heat is unbearable. The kind of heat that sticks to your skin and doesn't let go. The only trees around are the ones planted in the medians, and even those don't last long before some drunk driver crashes into them. I grew up there, but I never really liked it. It always felt empty in a strange way. Not physically empty, but lifeless. Everything looked the same. The same houses, the same streets, the same routines. I always wanted to leave. Somewhere far away. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere that didn't feel so artificial. I wanted to get away from my parents, from the constant pressure, and from the dull gray feeling that suburban life gave me. If you couldn't tell already, I don't exactly love my life. It's boring, predictable, and suffocating. But there's something about this place that most people don't know. Something that doesn't match the clean image of coffee shops and wealthy teenagers driving expensive trucks. There's a piece of land near my neighborhood. Most people around here know about it, but they don't talk about it much. That land is tied to one of the most well-known unsolved murder cases in Texas. Between 1983 and 1991, 4 women were found dead there. Even with help from the FBI, the police never found who did it. Over time, more bodies were discovered. Most of them were young women who all seemed to fit a certain type. Even now, people still go missing around that area. No evidence, no clues, nothing. Most people say it's human trafficking or some kind of serial killer. That's what I used to believe too. It was the only explanation that made sense. But after what I experienced recently, I don't believe that anymore. My house is right next to that land. Not just close, but directly behind it. I live at the very edge of the neighborhood, where the houses stop and the open land begins. Behind my backyard fence, there's nothing but grass and scattered trees, stretching out into what people call the killing fields. After the bodies were found years ago, they turned the land into a cow pasture. Recently, the city bought it. They're planning to build more houses there, like they always do. Tear everything down and replace it with more neighborhoods. When I was a kid, me and the other kids would sneak out there all the time. We'd build little forts, play games, run around without thinking about anything. It was just another open field to us. We didn't care about what had happened there before. If I knew then what I know now, I would have never stepped foot out there. Everything started about 2 weeks ago. It was late, around 11 p.m., when I woke up. There was a storm outside, one of those heavy Gulf storms that shake everything. The wind was loud, and I could hear something hitting my fence over and over. I had just replaced that fence recently, and the last thing I wanted was to pay for repairs again. So even though I didn't want to, I got out of bed and walked into the living room, where my back door is. I pulled the blinds open and looked outside. The wind was strong, ripping leaves off trees and throwing debris everywhere. My fence was swaying hard, like it was about to give out. As I looked along the fence line, something caught my attention. At first, I thought it was just dirt or mud thrown by the storm. But then I saw the color more clearly. Red, dark, thick red. It covered the top of my fence, stretching across it. Some of it had already started dripping down onto the grass. I knew immediately what it was. Blood. There was no doubt in my mind. Then I saw what caused it. At the far end of the fence, there was a rabbit. Or at least, what used to be one. Its body was twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Its legs were broken and bent over its own body. Its face was torn open, and its eyes were hanging out. The only reason I knew it was a rabbit was because of its ears. I felt sick instantly. My stomach turned, and I had to look away. But at the same time, I was fully awake now, alert. Something was very wrong. I rushed to my room, grabbed my flashlight and my rifle, and went back to the door. When I stepped outside, the air hit me immediately. Cold, smooth, almost refreshing in a strange way. Normally, storms like that bring a clean smell, something natural. But this time, it was different. There was a heavy, rotten smell in the air, the kind of smell that sticks in your nose and makes your eyes water. It smelled like death. I covered my nose with my shirt and walked toward the fence. I scanned the area, looking for anything that could have done this. An animal, maybe, but nothing moved. I placed the flashlight in my mouth so I could use both hands. With my rifle in one hand and wooden boards in the other, I started reinforcing the fence. One by one, I pushed the boards against it, trying to keep it from collapsing in the wind. After finishing, I stepped back onto the patio and looked at my work. The fence seemed stable enough, but the rabbit was still there. I told myself I'd deal with it in the morning. Maybe call someone. Maybe clean it up myself. I didn't want to deal with it in the middle of a storm. That's when I heard it. A scratching sound. It started on the right side of the fence and moved quickly toward the left. It was fast and steady. Too steady to be a branch or debris. At first I thought it might be an animal, but something about it didn't feel right. Then, before I could react, the rabbit was yanked off the fence. It happened so fast I barely saw it. The force snapped part of the fence, and the rabbit's body tore in half. blood sprayed across the wood and grass. I froze. No animal around here could do something like that, not with that kind of strength. In my panic, I bit down hard on the flashlight in my mouth and felt something crack. Pain shot through my jaw. I had broken one of my teeth. I didn't care. I ran back inside as fast as I could, slammed the door, locked it, and closed the blinds. My heart was racing so hard it felt like it would burst. I threw up multiple times that night. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I called the police. I told them everything. They came, looked at the blood, the remains, the broken fence. They couldn't explain it, but they took it seriously enough to keep an officer nearby for a few days. I cleaned everything up. The storm passed. Slowly, things started to feel normal again. But it didn't last. A few nights later, I woke up again. This time around midnight. There was no storm. Bang. Bang. Then a high-pitched squeal. Bang. I froze in bed, listening. It was rhythmic, controlled. Then I understood. Something was hitting my fence, over and over. And that squeal, another rabbit. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight again. My tooth still hurt, but I ignored it. Before going outside, I checked through the window. Everything looked still. Then the banging stopped. Silence. I let out a small laugh, trying to calm myself, trying to convince myself I was in control. But deep down, I felt something else. Like whatever was out there could feel my fear. I got angry. This was my house. I wasn't going to be scared off. I stepped outside. The air was completely still. No wind, no movement, nothing. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and heavy. I slowly scanned the fence from left to right. Then, I noticed something. Near the right side of the fence, where I kept bricks and gravel, there was a slight movement. I turned my head as fast as I could, and I saw it. It was pale, with dark patches across its body. Not like an animal's pattern, more like something rotting. It was large, bigger than any animal I had seen in person. Its body was thin, stretched, unnatural. Its back legs were draped over the top of my fence, like it was hanging there. Only its front limbs touched my yard. I couldn't even tell what they were. Hands, paws, something in between. Its body looked wrong, like something that had been starved and broken. Its head hung low, below its shoulders. It was bald. Its face was stretched into a wide, unnatural smile, covered in blood. Its eyes were completely dark, and its teeth, they didn't match. Some were sharp like an animal's. Others looked human. Crooked, uneven, like they had been taken from different mouths. It just lay there, watching me. Without thinking, I pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed, and for a second I couldn't see anything from the flash. When my vision cleared, I saw blood pouring from above its left eye. Its head jerked back. Then it stayed there, still. For a moment, I thought I had killed it. Then slowly, it lowered its head again. The smile never left its face. It stuck out its tongue, letting the blood drip onto it. I couldn't move. Then suddenly my body reacted. I turned and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. But it didn't chase me. It didn't try to break in. That's when I realized something worse. It didn't want to kill me. Not yet. It wanted me to be afraid. It wanted me to understand that it could come back any time it wanted. And I know it will. I don't know how, but I know. It will kill me eventually. And when it does, it will take pieces of me. My teeth, my skin, And maybe it will leave them somewhere for someone else to find. Maybe the reason the police and the FBI never found anything is because they were looking for a person when they should have been looking for something else entirely. Story 5. I live a pretty normal life in a quiet suburban area just outside of Houston. It's the kind of place where everything feels predictable. Every fast food chain is nearby, every grocery store looks the same, and every street blends into the next. The lawns are always green, the sprinklers turn on at the same time every day, and the neighbors never seem to move away. On the surface, it's peaceful, maybe even perfect. I've lived in the same house my whole life. Same street, same routine, same people. Every Sunday, without fail, I take my dog for a walk along the path that curves around my old high school. Sometimes, my brother Darren used to come with me, but recently, he's changed. A lot. He barely leaves his room now. He spends most of his time reading science magazines, completely absorbed in them. Whenever I try to talk to him, it feels like I'm talking to a wall. Or worse, like I'm annoying him. It's like he's become a completely different person overnight, and I don't understand why. This all really started during the summer of 2015. It was one of those hot, sticky nights where the air feels heavy and bugs are everywhere. The kind of night where sleep doesn't come easy. I woke up suddenly to a loud buzzing sound in my room. It was constant and irritating. Even though my room is pretty big, the bugs always seem to gather in the one place I don't want them to be. I waved my hand around, trying to get rid of them, when I felt a light breeze brush against my fingers. That's when I realized I had left my window open. Annoyed, I got up to close it, but before I pulled the curtains shut, something outside caught my attention. There was someone standing on the front lawn. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But as I looked closer, I saw a figure moving strangely under the flickering streetlights. The lights kept blinking on and off, and around them was a swarm of moths and gnats, circling like a storm of wings. The figure was dancing, or maybe running in circles. It looked ridiculous. Then, I recognized him. Darren. I shouted out the window. My voice echoed down the empty street. Get back inside. I almost got it, he yelled back, not stopping. He was running in circles like a kid, swinging a net at something glowing faintly in the air. A small blue insect shimmered as it darted around him. I sighed, realizing what he was doing. He had always been obsessed with catching insects and pinning them up in his room. A white moth fluttered into my room and landed gently on my nose. I carefully moved it off and closed the window, trapping it inside with me. It was actually kind of beautiful. I lay back down, watching it bump softly against my furniture as it tried to find a way out. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I stretched and checked the time. It was Saturday, which meant the house would be busy. I went downstairs and poured myself a bowl of chocolate cereal with some orange juice. My mom was in the kitchen cooking eggs. My dad sat at the table reading the newspaper, and my sister was in the living room, completely focused on the TV. "Where's Darren?" she asked without looking away from the screen. My dad answered, saying something about him being in the basement. Then he started talking about how there had been a lot of moths around lately. He said something about how they symbolize change, then went on a rant about how creepy they were. I corrected him, saying Darren liked butterflies, not moths, but he just waved it off, saying they were basically the same thing. The conversation went nowhere, like usual. Then my sister came over and tugged on my sleeve, asking if she could come with me to walk the dog. I hesitated for a second. Something felt off. I checked the time again. It wasn't Saturday. I frowned. That didn't make any sense. My dad was home, which usually meant it was the weekend. But the watch didn't lie. Still, I ignored the feeling and grabbed the leash. The dog wagged his tail excitedly. As I was tying my shoes, I suddenly felt a hand grab my shoulder hard. I turned around, startled. It was Darren. He looked different. His face was pale, his eyes wide, and he was breathing heavily like he had just run a mile. "Don't go outside today," he said quickly. "Please. Something bad is coming." I pulled away from him, annoyed. "What are you talking about? You're scaring her." "A storm is coming," he said. "You have to stay inside." "What storm?" I asked. He hesitated, then took off his glasses. For a moment, it looked like he was about to cry. "Can't you see it?" he said quietly. "The moths. Things are changing. Reality is changing. Because of you." My sister started crying immediately. I snapped at him, calling him a liar, and quickly took my sister outside before he could say anything else. I didn't look back. The walk was completely normal. Nothing strange happened. No storm, no danger, nothing. Just the usual path, the usual quiet streets. But my sister wouldn't stop asking questions. She kept bringing up what Darren said, asking if we were going to die, asking what the calamity was. I didn't have answers. The only strange thing I could think of was the moth from last night. When we reached the school, we stopped for a moment. Everything looked the same as always. Calm. Ordinary. Then suddenly my sister ran toward a tree. Before I could stop her, she threw a rock. It hit a wasp nest. I braced myself for the worst. I covered my face, expecting pain. But it never came. Instead, I felt something soft. I opened my eyes. It wasn't wasps. It was moths. Dozens of them, maybe more, surrounding us, brushing against my skin, fluttering through my hair. Then, just as suddenly, they flew away into the sky. I stood there, confused. The next morning, I woke up again, same routine, same house. But something was different. It was Wednesday. I went downstairs, and everything looked exactly the same. My family was in their usual spots. "Where's Darren?" my sister asked again. This time, he came running down the stairs, clutching a notebook, shouting something about everyone dying before running out of the house. I stared after him, confused. Was he talking about some disease outbreak? I brushed it off. That day felt normal too. School, home, nothing unusual, just the same routine. But the next morning, everything broke. I woke up, went downstairs, got my food. Everything seemed normal. Then Darren burst into my room, panicked. "Have you seen her?" he asked. "Where is she?" "Who?" I said, confused. "Our sister," he shouted. "She's missing." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" I said slowly, "We don't have a sister." He looked at me like I had just said something insane. "Yes, we do. We've always had one." "No," I said. "Mom is pregnant. I'm the only one right now." He started searching my room frantically, throwing things around. "What are you doing?" I asked. "The moth," he said. "You trapped it. We have to let it go." I laughed. "It's just a bug." He froze. "You don't understand," he whispered. I was tired of it. Tired of his nonsense. I grabbed a book from my desk and slammed it down. Silence filled the room. "There," I said. "Problem solved." He looked at me like I had done something terrible. His eyes filled with tears. For a moment, I felt a little guilty, but then I shrugged it off. It was just a bug. He dropped his notebook, and the pages scattered across the floor. I glanced down. Every page was filled with the same sentence, written over and over again. She killed it again. That night, I went outside. I don't really remember why. I just remember running across the yard, chasing something glowing in the dark. A beautiful blue insect. I laughed as I ran, swinging the net. I almost had it. Then finally, I caught it. I slowed down, breathing heavily, and looked inside the net. Something pale clung to it. A moth. I frowned. Darren doesn't like moths. For a moment, I felt confused, like I had forgotten something important. The streetlights flickered. The air buzzed softly. I shrugged it off. The moth struggled weakly in the net before I let it go. It fluttered away into the night. I turned back toward the house. My window was still open. I should probably close it before something gets in. Story 6. I'm writing this from a white padded room. They call it an asylum. To me, it feels more like a waiting room, a place where time doesn't move properly, a place where I sit and wait for her. I'm putting this out there because maybe, just maybe, someone will believe me. Someone will understand what's really happening. I can't sleep. I haven't slept properly in years. Every time I close my eyes, I see hers. Green eyes. Bright, sharp, unforgettable. I first met Elise through my best friend, Marcus. He introduced us one afternoon like it was nothing, like she was just another person passing through our lives. But the moment I saw her, I knew she wasn't. She laughed, and the sunlight caught her eyes in a way that made them glow. It looked like green fire, something alive inside them. I was completely drawn in. But she didn't notice me. She noticed Marcus. Of course she did. He was confident, easy to talk to, the kind of person people naturally liked. I stood beside him like background noise while they talked and laughed like they had known each other forever. It didn't take long. They fell in love. And I watched it happen. They started spending all their time together. Inside jokes, long conversations, late-night calls. I was still there, technically part of the group, but it was obvious I didn't matter in the same way anymore. When they got engaged, I smiled. I congratulated them. I stood beside Marcus like a good friend and told him he was lucky. Inside, something in me broke, but I kept smiling. I shouldn't have done what I did next. I know that now. But at the time, it felt inevitable. Hiking was something Marcus and I had always done together. We knew the trails better than anyone. Every shortcut, every dangerous path, every unstable ledge. It was our thing. One morning, we went out like we always did. The air was cool, the sky clear. Nothing felt unusual. We reached a narrow part of the trail, where the ground wasn't stable. Loose rocks, a steep drop. The kind of place where you had to be careful. Marcus stepped forward, and in that moment, everything slowed down. I remember thinking how easy it would be. Just one small movement, one push. He slipped. Or at least, that's what it looked like. But I know the truth. I helped him fall. He didn't even have time to react. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. The sound of him hitting the rocks below echoed for a long time. I stood there, staring down, my heart pounding. Then I turned around and walked back. After that, everything changed. Elise was devastated. She cried for days, barely able to function. I stayed with her, comforted her, told her she wasn't alone. "I'm here," I told her, and she held on to me like I was the only thing keeping her together. Over time, I became exactly that, the person she depended on, the person she trusted. Eventually, we got married. It all happened so fast, too fast. But I didn't question it. I got what I wanted, a life with her, a family. We had a daughter not long after. When I first saw her, I felt something I didn't expect. Happiness. Real, genuine happiness. She had her mother's eyes. Green, bright, beautiful. For a while, everything felt right. Like maybe I had made the right choice. Like maybe it had all been worth it. But that feeling didn't last. It never does. The routine started wearing me down. The sleepless nights, the constant crying, the pressure of maintaining this life I had forced into existence. Elise changed too. She became tired, stressed, always on edge. The baby cried constantly, day and night. It never seemed to stop. At 2 months old, her cries felt like they were cutting straight through my head. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. It started with small arguments, then louder ones, then shouting. And then something shifted. Elise looked at me differently. Her expression changed from anger to something else. Understanding. "You," she said, her voice shaking. "Marcus," in that moment, I knew. She had figured it out. Panic hit me, all at once. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I moved. My hands were on her throat. I remember the way her eyes widened, the way she tried to speak but couldn't. And then, nothing. She stopped moving. The room went completely quiet. Even the baby stopped crying. I turned toward her. She was staring at me, completely still, her green eyes locked onto mine. There was no confusion in them, no innocence, just something cold, something aware, something that made my chest tighten. I told myself it wasn't possible. She was only 2 months old. A baby couldn't understand something like that. A baby couldn't remember. Babies don't judge. They don't watch. That's what I kept telling myself, over and over again. But she didn't cry anymore. Not once. From that night on, she never cried again. She just watched. Everywhere I went, I could feel her eyes on me. When I ate, when I sat down, when I tried to sleep, she followed me with that same unblinking stare. As she grew older, it only got worse. Other people didn't notice anything strange. They saw a quiet child, a calm child, but I saw the way she looked at me. Cold, unforgiving. Sometimes I would walk into her room and things would feel wrong. Objects would be slightly out of place, not randomly, but intentionally, like they had been moved to face me. Mirrors started bothering me. My reflection didn't feel right anymore. Sometimes it looked like it was a second too slow, or a second too fast, like it wasn't really me. There were moments when I would see her in one part of the house, only to find her somewhere else seconds later. She would hum songs Elise used to sing, not softly, not like a child copying something, but like she understood them, like she remembered them. By the time she was 15, she didn't need to say anything. Her silence said everything. I tried to convince myself again that it was all in my head, that she couldn't possibly remember something from when she was 2 months old. But every time she looked at me, that lie became harder to believe. I started to panic. I tried to tell people. I told my brother that something was wrong, that she was watching me, that she knew what I did. He laughed it off. Everyone did. They thought I was imagining things. They thought I was losing my mind. That's when I realized the truth. No one would ever believe me. Not really. One night, I tried to run. I went to my neighbors, told them everything. About her eyes, about what she knew, about what she was going to do. They called the police. When the officers arrived, they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel what I felt. They just saw a man falling apart, and that was enough. They took me away. Now I'm here, in this place. White walls, soft padding, silence that feels too heavy. But she still comes. Every day, she sits across from me. Same green eyes, sharp as ever. She doesn't speak. She doesn't smile. She doesn't cry. She just watches me, and I break a little more each time. Because I understand now. She doesn't need to do anything. She doesn't need to hurt me. She just needs to be there, watching, waiting, reminding me. Every single day, every single night, I lie awake, staring at the door, imagining her standing on the other side, those same green eyes, unblinking, endless. For years, I told myself it wasn't possible, that she couldn't remember, that she was just a baby. But I know now, she remembers everything. She always has, all the small things, the looks, the silence, the way she never cried. It was never random. It was never normal. It was her way of telling me. She knew, and she still knows. I will never escape her. I will never sleep again. Even now, as I write this, I can feel her watching me. She doesn't need to speak. She never will. And I know one thing for certain. She will never forgive me. Story 7. It's getting worse lately. Some days I think my mother was right about me. Maybe whatever was wrong with her was passed down to me, only twisted into something even worse by the time it reached me. Like the saying about the apple not falling far from the tree. Except in my case, it must have hit every branch on the way down, bounced off a few more, and finally landed broken at my feet. Madness seems to run in the family, not the dramatic kind people romanticize, but the ugly kind, the kind that turns a person into a warning, the kind that makes children whisper stories about the hermit in the woods. I suppose that is what I've become, a ghost story without the fame, a strange, bitter little man who only wants one thing from the world, to be left alone. I never understood the need people have for companionship, friendship, romance, casual conversation, any of it. I found most people unbearable, and the feeling usually seemed to be mutual. I was difficult even as a child. I hated being touched. A light hand on my shoulder could ruin an entire day. I hated baby carrots, though normal carrots were perfectly fine. I hated nail polish, the color purple, certain fonts, and 1,000 other small things that felt impossible to explain to anyone else. The city I was born into made everything worse. It was loud, crowded, restless, and hostile. A place of concrete and glass where silence did not exist. Every morning at 6:30, a train tore through the space between the apartment buildings near our home. I came to think of it as a steel serpent, some shrieking mechanical beast that waited outside my dreams and attacked the moment I began to feel calm. I remember those dreams clearly. I was always somewhere peaceful, a quiet cabin in the woods, a lonely pier stretching over a still lake, a place where I could breathe. I would begin to relax, maybe for the first time in the entire day, and then the sound would come. The scream of wheels grinding against metal, the shaking thunder of the train forcing its way into my peace. Then I would wake up soaked in sweat, already crying, already terrified of the day. This happened so often that I began to dread sleep itself. Morning became a kind of torture. I never had a chance to wake gently. I was ripped out of sleep by noise, thrown into panic before I even opened my eyes. As hard as it was for me, I think it was worse for my mother. At first, she tried to comfort me. She would sit beside me, hold me, tell me it was only a train, only a sound, only something that would pass. But over time, her patience wore away. Consoling turned into scolding. Shouting turned into blows. I have spent years telling myself I don't blame her. Maybe I really don't. She was alone, and I was not an easy child. She had troubles of her own, troubles not so different from mine. I could see that even then. Something was wrong inside her too, something that made kindness difficult and anger easy. But still, she never abandoned me. She threatened to, many times. She told me she would put me in the system and be rid of me forever, but she never did it. I used to think that meant she loved me in her own broken way. Now I think it was something closer to possession. I was hers because she had made me. Whatever happened to me belonged to her. Years passed. I made it into adulthood somehow, though I never felt properly suited for it. I learned how to move through the world without belonging to it. I worked when I had to, spoke when I had to. Then came the evening in late December, when everything changed. I had been driving down a long stretch of highway after dark. I liked driving at night because it felt almost like being nowhere. Just the road, the engine, and my thoughts. The world passed beside me, without asking anything from me. I remember thinking that if the road never ended, I might not mind. Every now and then another car would pass, and each time it jolted me out of myself. The low growl of the engine, the sudden violent rush of air as it flew by, the reminder that I still existed in a world with other people in it. Each passing car felt like a drip of water against my skull, tiny, harmless by itself, unbearable in repetition. The next car, then the next, then the next. I could feel myself tightening inside. The strange thing is that I do not remember deciding to stop. One moment I was driving, and the next I was pulled over on the side of the highway, sweating so hard my clothes clung to me. My hands were locked around the steering wheel, and my knuckles were white with effort. I sat there for a long time, staring ahead, until I finally turned the engine off. The silence that followed was so pure that it almost felt holy. It was as if I had spent my whole life underwater, and had only then broken the surface. I stepped out of the car into the cold night air, and breathed so deeply it hurt. Above me, the sky was full of stars. Real stars, not the weak ones you see above a city, but endless bright ones scattered so thickly it looked unreal. I stood there and understood all at once that wherever I had been going no longer mattered. I had escaped. I left my keys in the ignition, closed the car door, stepped off the road, and walked into the darkness without looking back. I wandered for days. I had no food, no map, no proper plan, just the clothes on my back and the certainty that whatever I found ahead would be better than the life I had left behind. I felt ridiculous sometimes, like some holy fool or starving monk searching for enlightenment. But I kept walking. Eventually, I came upon a clearing, and in that clearing stood an abandoned cabin. The first time I saw it, I actually laughed. It was as if something I had imagined 1,000 times had risen out of the earth to meet me. The cabin was old, crooked, and neglected. Parts of the roof sagged. The paint had peeled away years ago. The porch leaned slightly to one side, and yet it felt warm, inviting, familiar. I looked at it and thought, there you are. It felt less like I had found a home, and more like I had found a piece of myself waiting patiently. Life out there was difficult at first, but it was mine. I learned how to make do. I repaired what I could, planted a garden, trapped what animals I needed, collected water, chopped wood, and built myself a routine that belonged to no one else. The world narrowed into something manageable: a cabin, a clearing, the trees, the weather, the changing light. I thought I had finally found peace. Then my mug appeared on my nightstand. That may not sound like much, but I knew exactly where I had left it. I always left it on the kitchen counter. I was particular about certain things, and that mug was one of them. I did not bring it into the bedroom, ever. Yet one morning, there it sat on my nightstand, as if it had spent the night watching me sleep. I stood over it for a long time, trying to think of some reasonable explanation. Sleepwalking, forgetfulness, distraction, none of it felt right. I knew I had not moved it. It was such a small thing, and still I could not let it go. If it wasn't me, then something else had done it. That was when I first began to think of him. I don't know why I imagined a him instead of anything else. Perhaps because it sounded rude, and because I could not bear the idea of a female presence in my private space. My mother had made female company feel invasive in a way I never quite recovered from. So I decided, almost politely, that if something unseen was living with me, it was a he, a silent roommate, a trespasser with manners bad enough to move my belongings, but restrained enough not to reveal himself openly. I found the thought disturbing, but oddly less disturbing than the alternatives. If I had to be haunted, then at least let it be by someone quiet. Weeks passed, and small things kept happening. Objects were never where I left them. A spoon in the wrong drawer. A book turned upside down. My boots angled toward the door when I knew I had left them facing the wall. Each incident was small enough to dismiss on its own, but together they formed a pattern I could not ignore. He was there. He had always been there, perhaps. Or perhaps he had only recently begun to make himself known. Sometimes I even found myself feeling almost amused by it, as though I had caught a timid animal sneaking through the house. But then he started getting bolder. One afternoon, while washing something at the sink, I caught a glimpse of movement outside the window, just a flash in the corner of my eye. Something dark standing near the edge of the clearing, half hidden among the trees. When I turned to look directly, nothing was there. I told myself it was a shadow, a trick of light, a branch moving in the wind. Yet I could not shake the certainty that someone had been watching me from the tree line. Not an animal, a figure, thin, upright, patient. It is not paranoia if there is something there. That is what I kept telling myself. After that, the knocking began. At first it was easy to blame the wind. The cabin was old. It groaned, shifted, complained. But this was different. These were distinct knocks. Sharp, deliberate, knuckles on wood. They always came from the other side of the cabin, just far enough away that by the time I reached the sound, it had stopped. Sometimes it was 3 knocks, sometimes 5, sometimes a frantic rattling that made it sound as though someone were trying a door that would not open. Every time, my whole body jerked at the sound. Every time, I told myself I would ignore it. And every time, I listened for the next one. The worst part was that it did not stay inside the cabin. One day, I was outside tending to my garden when I heard knocking beside me. So close it was, as if an invisible door had suddenly materialized in the open air. I straightened slowly, dirt on my hands, my heart beating hard with anger more than fear. That was the moment I understood it. He was not haunting the cabin. He was haunting me. Then I started seeing the door. At first, it was nothing more than a shape at the edge of sight, a darker rectangle against a wall where no door should be, a suggestion in the corner of the room, something blurred and wrong. I could turn my head toward it, and it would be gone. But the next time I passed, there it was again. Slowly, over days or weeks, I cannot say which, it became clearer. A real door, plain wood, closed, out of place, and undeniable. I cannot explain how one finds a door that was never there before. It felt less like discovering something new, and more like finally being allowed to see something that had always existed. And from behind that impossible door, he knocked. I still did not open it. The thought of meeting him properly, of giving shape and body to whatever presence had taken root in my life, sickened me. As long as he remained unseen, I could tell myself many things. He could be a spirit, a delusion, a splinter of my mind, a harmless thing. Once I opened the door, I would lose all those possibilities. He would become real in whatever form reality chose, and I was not sure I could endure that. Still, he would not leave me alone. I had come to the woods to escape noise, people, demands, intrusion, to create one small pocket of existence that belonged only to me. And now this thing, this presence, this man or ghost or sickness, had become the one obstacle standing between me and the peace I had built. It wore me down. The knocking never stopped for long. Day after day, night after night, it continued. Sometimes soft, sometimes furious, sometimes so constant that I felt it behind my eyes even when the cabin was quiet. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped trusting my own thoughts. I began to imagine the simplest solution. If he would not leave, perhaps I would have to remove him. I am not proud of how quickly that thought rooted itself in me. Murder is not the kind of idea one likes to find waiting inside oneself. I tried to be reasonable. If he was a ghost, could he even be killed? If he was only a symptom of my own unraveling, what then? I asked myself what real harm he had done. A moved mug, some knocking, glimpses in the dark. Was that enough to justify violence? I tried to hear my mother's voice in my head, telling me to be better, to be patient, to turn the other cheek. But her voice did not comfort me. It accused. It pressed in on me the same way the knocking did. And the more I tried to argue with myself, the more exhausted I became. Eventually, I stopped arguing. I decided I would kill him. After that decision, things grew even less stable. My thoughts began slipping in ways I could not follow. Memories no longer fit together properly. Time felt cut into fragments and shuffled out of order. There were moments when I would be sitting in the cabin, thinking of the door, and then suddenly, I would be somewhere else entirely. The clearest of these places was Lake Tahoe. I had once seen it in a magazine. A 2-page photograph spread perfectly across the center pages. The horizon line sat just above the middle, and for some reason that balance pleased me deeply. Snow-covered mountains, surrounded water so still and clear, it looked unreal. The image had stayed with me for years, as my idea of pure peace. I used to stare at those pages and feel something close to grief, because I knew places like that existed, and I was not in one of them. Then one day, or one moment, or one broken piece of my life, I was there. The lake was even more beautiful in person than in the photograph. The air was cold and clean. Snow drifted down in pale flakes, dissolving where it touched the dark water. It was exactly the kind of place I had always wanted. quiet, vast, untouched by the city's ugliness. My mother was there with me on the pier, as if that made sense. She spoke in the same familiar tone that could never decide whether it wanted to comfort or wound. She said I should have dressed better for the weather, that the cold would kill me. I looked at her and felt a strange weakness spread through me. What had I meant to do? Why was I angry? Had I intended to kill her? Had I already done something terrible? My memories were tangled so tightly I could no longer separate them. It felt as if my life had been rearranged frame by frame by some invisible hand, like stop-motion animation in an old children's film. I remembered watching Wallace and Gromit as a child, and being fascinated by the idea that every tiny movement had been created by an outside force. One frame, then another, then another. Did the character know what happened between moments? Did he feel the giant hand twisting him into place? Lately, I had begun to wonder the same thing about myself. Maybe each version of me only existed for an instant before being replaced by another, almost identical, carrying the same memories and mistakes. Maybe I had died 1,000 times already and never noticed. My mother kept talking. She said she had waited for me. She said it had always been just the two of us. She said I had left her alone. There was accusation in every word. Possession too. You're mine. You can't abandon me. I remember feeling torn between pity, anger, and a desperate need to escape. Yet even as I listened, I found myself thinking about the snow. I had always loved snow. It made the world quiet. The layers of it absorbed sound, softened edges, covered ugliness. At Christmas, when the first flakes fell, it was as if the world's volume had been turned down. I loved that. Then came the sound of the train. At first distant, then louder, the old mechanical rumble that had stalked my life since childhood. I thought perhaps this was the end of whatever strange place I had entered. I stood on the pier with my mother and heard the steel scream of brakes as the ground shook beneath me. I closed my eyes, expecting impact, awakening, annihilation, something final. When I opened them, I was still there on the pier, at the far end, where there should have been only snow and shoreline. An empty subway train waited with its doors open. I heard the recorded voice say, "Mind the gap." I do not know why I got on. Perhaps because there seemed to be no other choice. My mother would not come. She said she would catch the next one, which struck me as absurd, because I knew somehow there would not be a next one. So I entered the train and sat alone. There is something deeply wrong about being alone in a place meant for crowds. I used to think solitude was the purest comfort, but that kind of solitude felt different. It made me feel like an intruder in a ritual I did not understand. Outside the windows, the world moved by in a blur. Forest, shadows, the fading light of sunset. Then, full darkness. The train went on and on, deeper into trees so dense they seemed to swallow the tracks. Branches slapped the sides of the cars. The lights overhead flickered. In the brief moments of darkness between flashes, I saw an orange glow far off among the trees. Smoke. Fire. The train slowed and stopped beside a small clearing. My cabin was burning. Flames poured from the windows and roof, turning the place into a black skeleton wrapped in light. For a moment, I could only stare. My sanctuary, my home, the one place that had ever felt like mine, was being consumed before my eyes. Then, I saw a figure standing in the window. Him, the intruder, calm inside the blaze, waiting. All my confusion hardened into rage. I ran toward the cabin. The heat hit me instantly, fierce enough to make my skin feel as if it were splitting open. My clothes caught fire, or seemed to, and yet I kept moving. I slammed into the front door, only to find it locked, though I knew that door had never had a lock. I pounded on it, rattled it, threw myself against it again and again, while the fire roared around me. Every blow felt like an answer to all those weeks of knocking. Every impact said, "Open." Every impact said, "Let me in." At last, the door gave way, falling inward, and I stumbled into the burning room. There he stood. He was a stranger, and he was me. For one wild, suspended instant, I simply stared. I had almost forgotten my own face. He looked calm, even content, standing in the center of the flames, as if this were exactly where he had expected to be all along. He reached out a hand, not threatening, not afraid, reassuring. Then he spoke. He said it was getting cold. And suddenly my mother's voice returned, saying we were not dressed for the weather. Everything shattered. Now I am lying in the snow, and I think at last I understand. The stars are not stars. They are snowflakes falling through the trees and landing on my skin. They sting, they melt, they blister. It is freezing, but I am beyond shivering. My body feels far away, numb, slowed. At first, I keep trying to return to the fire, the train, the cabin, my mother on the pier. But I know those are only broken masks stretched over the truth. The truth is simpler and sadder. I was driving home. I stopped the car. I walked into the woods because I wanted silence more than I wanted life. Maybe I found an abandoned cabin once, or maybe I only dreamed of it for so long that it became more real than the world. Maybe I burned there, or froze there, or simply lay down and let the cold do what it wanted. What a ridiculous creature I am. All this ruin, all this confusion, all this damage, in pursuit of one small moment of quiet. And yet, even now, with the cold eating its way through me, I cannot help but smile a little. There is something tragic in that, and something honest. I wanted peace so badly that I followed it past reason, past memory, past myself. I must be mad. And still, as the snow falls and the world softens into silence, I find that I love it. I always loved the snow. Story 8. I am writing this from my car beneath the hard white glow of a 24-hour gas station canopy. The fluorescent lights above me are buzzing so loudly that I can hear them even through the heater. All 4 doors are locked. The engine is still running. The heat is turned all the way up, and every light inside the vehicle is on. I am parked in the middle of concrete, cameras, and artificial light, and still my hands will not stop shaking on the steering wheel. I'm a county police officer. I've only been on the job for 2 years, but in that short time I built a reputation for being serious, careful, and the kind of person who follows procedure. Exactly. I trust rules. I trust checklists. I trust training. In this job, the manual keeps you alive. If you approach a stop the right way, park the cruiser at the correct angle, run the plates, control the space, and stick to protocol, you remove surprises. You reduce the danger. You stay in charge. That's what I always believed. My patrol area is a long, empty section of 2-lane county highway. It's one of the loneliest assignments in the department. The road runs along the eastern side of a huge freshwater lake. On one side, there is a steep, rocky embankment dropping straight into the black water. On the other, there is a wall of pine forest, so dense it looks solid at night. There are no homes out there, no street lights, no intersections, and no side roads for more than 40 miles. Just a strip of dark pavement, trapped between deep woods and deep water. I work nights. From 10 in the evening until 6 in the morning, I drive that road back and forth. Most shifts are uneventful. The radio barely speaks. The only things I hear are my tires on the road, the hum of the engine, and sometimes the wind coming off the lake. Once in a while, I stop a trucker who got lost or a teenager driving too fast. But most nights are quiet and predictable. That was one of the reasons I liked the assignment. Tonight began exactly the same way. The sky was clear, but the cold had settled in hard. Fog was lifting off the surface of the lake and crawling over the road in pale strips. I was driving around 40 miles an hour with one hand on the wheel and a cup of coffee that had already gone lukewarm in the console. I was scanning the road the way I always do, half on habit, half on instinct. At around 2:15 in the morning, I saw a vehicle several miles ahead of me. It was a dark minivan, older model, moving much slower than it should have been. I sped up a little to close the gap, expecting maybe a tired driver or someone unsure of where they were. As I got closer, two things stood out immediately. The passenger side taillight was out completely, and the van was weaving. Not violently, not the kind of swerving that screams drunk driver right away. It was a slow drifting movement, like the person behind the wheel was fading in and out, or losing focus. The van drifted over the yellow center line, corrected lazily, then wandered back toward the white line at the edge near the lake. That combination was enough. A broken taillight alone is minor. A broken taillight plus lane drifting gives you reasonable suspicion. Could be intoxication. Could be exhaustion. Either way, I had to stop them. I pulled in behind the van, kept a safe distance, and switched on the overheads. Red and blue lights burst across the highway, flashing off the pines and cutting through the fog. The driver took a while to react. A long while. Nearly a quarter mile passed before the right blinker came on and the van slowly pulled onto the narrow shoulder. It stopped only a few feet from the drop into the lake. I parked behind it the way I was trained to. Offset slightly left, wheels turned toward the road. Cruiser angled so that if someone hit me from behind, I wouldn't be pushed directly into the stopped vehicle. I put the car in park, unbuckled my seatbelt, took my flashlight, and stepped out into the cold. The night was almost silent. Both engines idled low. Gravel crunched under my boots. From below, faint and distant, I could hear water hitting the rocks. I walked up to the rear of the minivan and placed my palm against the trunk. Another step drilled into me from day one. Leave your print. Leave evidence you were there if the stop goes bad. The metal felt damp and much colder than I expected. I remember noticing that, though it didn't mean anything to me at the time. I moved up along the driver's side, keeping the flashlight low until I reached the window. I stayed just behind the frame, where I wouldn't be an easy target if the door swung open. Then I tapped the glass. The window rolled down by hand with a dry squeak. I raised my flashlight and looked inside. It was just a family. A middle-aged woman was driving. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sits deep in the face. Her hair was messy, and there were dark circles under her eyes. In the passenger seat was a man in a flannel shirt, head tilted back, asleep, lightly snoring like he had no care in the world. In the back were two kids, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, both asleep against the windows. Blankets and pillows were piled around them. It looked normal, completely normal, just a family trying to push through the last part of a long drive. I told the woman why I stopped her. I mentioned the taillight and the lane drifting. She apologized immediately in a tired, rough voice and said they had been driving for a long time and were trying to get where they were going before morning. I told her I understood, but that driving tired on that road was dangerous, especially that close to the water. I asked for her license, registration, and proof of insurance. She reached across the sleeping man, opened the glove box, and handed everything to me. When her fingers touched mine, her skin was freezing, not cold from weather. Freezing, like I had touched a piece of ice that had been sitting outside for hours. That should have bothered me more than it did. I told her I'd be back in a moment after I ran the information. She didn't say anything. She only nodded and stared ahead through the windshield, like she was too tired for anything else. I returned to the cruiser, shut the door, and put the documents on the center console. I turned on the dome light, picked up the radio mic, and called dispatch for a plate check. The dispatcher working that shift was an older woman, who usually handled the slow overnight hours. She told me to stand by, because the system was moving slowly. So I waited. That part was routine too. The stop was basically done in my mind. Run the plates, verify the papers, write a warning for the taillight, and strongly advise the driver to pull over somewhere safe and sleep. Nothing unusual, nothing difficult. While waiting, I looked down at the dash monitor out of habit. Every patrol cruiser has one. It shows the live feed from the front camera during a stop. The display is black and white, high contrast, designed for visibility in the dark. I always check it just to make sure the camera has the vehicle in view. The moment I looked at it, everything changed. I stopped breathing. The van on the screen was not the van I had just walked away from. It was crushed, completely crushed. The roof had collapsed inward, like a giant hand had pressed down on it. The rear bumper hung twisted and half torn away. The whole body of the vehicle was covered in long draping weeds, algae, and black slime. The tires looked rotten, swallowed partly by mud. It looked exactly like something dragged from the bottom of a lake after sitting underwater for decades. That alone would have been enough to make me question my mind. But then I saw the faces. In the back of the van, pressed close together behind the shattered rear window, were 4 people. The mother, the father, the boy, the girl. Only they weren't people anymore. Their flesh was gray and bloated, peeling away in wet strips. Their faces were half skeletal. Their eye sockets were hollow, dark, and full of standing water. They were packed tightly together, shoulder to shoulder, staring directly into the camera. All 4 of them were smiling. Not a normal smile. Their jaws were stretched too far, skin pulled back in wet, impossible grins. They were perfectly still, looking right into the lens as the emergency lights flashed over them. I jerked my head up and looked through the windshield. The clean minivan was still there. Its body looked fine. Its roof was intact. The brake light glowed softly red. I could see the shapes of the children asleep in the back. I could see the woman in the front seat. Normal. I looked back down. The wrecked van was still on the screen. The corpses were still there. Then they moved. The mother raised one arm. A bloated, ruined hand came up against the shattered rear window, and one finger began tapping the glass from the inside. Tap, tap, tap. I couldn't hear it through the cruiser, but I could see it. They kept smiling. I hit the side of the monitor with my hand, hard, thinking the screen was malfunctioning. The image flickered, but it didn't change. Then the radio crackled. Dispatch came back on, but her voice sounded wrong, shaken, confused. She asked if I was absolutely sure about the plate number and whether I was certain I was behind a dark minivan. I told her yes. that I was looking right at it. Then she told me the system had flagged the vehicle. The plates belonged to a missing persons case. 30 years old. I felt every bit of warmth leave my body. She read from the screen in front of her. A family of 4 had vanished while driving cross-country. Their last confirmed stop had been at a gas station near my current location. Investigators believed the driver may have fallen asleep and driven off the embankment into the lake. The car was never found. Neither were the bodies. The license in my hand belonged to the mother. She was listed as legally dead. I don't remember what I said after that, or if I said anything at all. I slowly looked back through the windshield. The van was gone, not pulling away, not disappearing into the distance. Just gone. The shoulder in front of me was empty. I swung the side spotlight onto the place where it had been parked. There were no tire tracks. Instead, there was a wide puddle of black water bubbling up through the gravel. Thick, foul-smelling water, seeped into the dirt as if it had been dumped there by something huge and heavy. A smell rolled into the cruiser through the vents almost immediately. Rotting fish, old mud, wet wood, deep water left undisturbed too long. I looked back at the screen. The screen now showed the empty shoulder and the black puddle. The wrecked van was gone. The faces were gone. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I dropped the radio mic and grabbed the gear shift. I didn't care about procedure anymore. I didn't care about calling for backup, or keeping my scene secure, or reporting my location. I only wanted to leave. I slammed the cruiser into drive. Before I could hit the gas, the whole vehicle lurched so hard my head snapped sideways. Something had hit the passenger side. Then I realized it wasn't an impact. It was a pull. My cruiser was sliding across the gravel shoulder toward the lake. I floored the gas. The engine roared. The rear tires spun and screamed, spitting dirt and rock everywhere. But the vehicle kept moving sideways. Whatever had hold of it was dragging 2 tons of steel toward the edge. I looked out the passenger window. The lake was boiling. The surface had erupted into white foam, black water heaving against the rocks. Rising out of it were 4 figures. The family. But now they looked exactly like they had on the monitor. Bloated, rotting, grinning, with hollow eyes and gray flesh hanging loose from their bones. They were not standing on the shore. They were suspended in the air. Behind each body, fused into their backs and spines, were huge black tentacles slick with water and mud. They were thick as tree trunks, flexing and pulling from the lake below. The dead family hung from them like puppets, their ruined hands gripping my cruiser's frame. The doors, the window scenes, the wheel wells, that was what was dragging me. The strength was unreal. The passenger side door buckled inward with a deep metallic groan. The window exploded into the cabin, showering the seat with cubes of safety glass. One rotting arm came through the opening, trailing weeds and black mud, and grabbed at the inside of the car. The smell was unbearable. Lake rot, wet decay, something ancient and dead. Then the rear of the cruiser slipped off the embankment. The whole vehicle dropped backward, slamming underneath against rocks. My stomach fell with it. Suddenly I was tilted toward the sky, and I knew I had maybe 1 second before the weight shifted completely and the cruiser rolled into the lake. I don't remember thinking. I just acted. I locked both hands on the wheel and shoved my boot flat to the floor. The engine screamed at full power. For a moment, nothing happened. The front tires held to the asphalt, while the back of the cruiser hung over black water, the entire vehicle suspended between the road and whatever was pulling me down. The frame groaned. The engine whined, The tentacles tightened. Then, the front tires caught. The cruiser shot forward with a violent jerk. I heard a wet tearing noise as the dead hands gripping the window frame were ripped away. The vehicle climbed over the edge, slammed onto the road, and launched forward. I never let off the gas. In the rear-view mirror, I saw the tentacles thrashing on the shoulder. The ruined family dangled from them for a second before the thing dragged them back down the embankment and into the lake. They vanished beneath the surface without a splash. I drove. I don't know how fast at first, only that the speedometer kept climbing. 100, 110, maybe more. I didn't turn on the siren. I didn't call dispatch back. I didn't say a word. I just drove until I saw the bright lights of this gas station and pulled under them like a man crawling into a church. I've been here ever since. I checked the passenger side of the cruiser. The window is shattered. The door is crushed inward in a deep, round dent. On the passenger seat, among the broken glass, are 3 severed skeletal fingers, coated in thick lake mud that still smells like rot. I'm not going back. Not to the station. Not to that road. Not to the lake. I'm leaving the keys in the ignition when I'm done here. And I'm walking away from this job for good. I spent 2 years believing that rules could handle anything. That procedure could make chaos manageable. That if you did your job right, you stayed in control. That is a lie. So I'm posting this as a warning. If you are ever driving alone at night on a long empty road beside deep water, and you see a vehicle ahead of you moving too slowly, drifting across the lines, trying to make you stop, keep driving. Do not pull over. Do not approach the vehicle. And if you see a tired family inside smiling politely through the glass, pretend you never saw them at all. Story 9. I have always been drawn to abandoned places. There is something about them that pulls me in, something I have never been able to explain properly. Maybe it is the silence. Maybe it is the feeling that time stopped there while the rest of the world kept moving. Or maybe it is the strange idea that when people leave a place behind, they never truly take all of themselves with them. Some part always remains. I have explored old houses, forgotten factories, empty schools, and run-down buildings most people would never go near. I always told myself I was just curious. I liked the history, the mystery, and the thrill of standing somewhere that felt frozen in the past. But one place changed the way I think about all of that. One place stayed with me long after I left it, and even now, a month later, I still cannot stop thinking about it. About a month ago, I heard people in town talking about an old hospital on the outskirts of the area. It had been shut down for more than 20 years. Everyone seemed to know about it, but no one wanted to go near it. Some said it was haunted. Others said strange things had happened there before it closed. A few people claimed they had seen lights in the windows at night, even though there was no electricity. Most of the locals treated the place like something best left alone. Of course, that only made me want to see it more. I told myself I was not going there because I believed in ghosts. I just wanted to look around. I wanted to see the building for myself, to walk through the halls, to feel the atmosphere, and maybe to prove that all the rumors were just stories people passed around because an abandoned hospital naturally made them uneasy. That was what I told myself anyway. I went in the late afternoon, when the sky was still bright enough that I would not be walking into complete darkness. Even so, as I drove toward it, I felt nervous in a way I usually did not. The hospital came into view through a line of overgrown trees, and it looked exactly like the kind of place people would make stories about. The building was huge, gray and dead-looking, with broken windows staring out like empty eyes. paint peeled off the walls in long strips. Weeds pushed up through the cracked pavement around the entrance, and vines crawled over parts of the outside walls, as if nature had spent years trying to drag the place back into the ground. I parked my car a short distance away and just sat there for a moment, looking at it. The whole place felt wrong even before I stepped out. It was not just because it was abandoned. I had been to plenty of abandoned places. This felt different. There was a heaviness around it, a kind of pressure in the air that made me feel like I was being warned to turn around and leave. I ignored it. The main entrance was chained shut, the doors covered in dirt and old scratches. But after walking around the side of the building, I found a side door hanging slightly open. It was just enough for me to slip through. I remember hesitating for a second before I pushed it wider. The metal made a low scraping sound that echoed deeper into the building, and for some reason that sound unsettled me more than anything else had so far. The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me. It was damp and stale, thick with mold and age, the kind of smell that clings to old buildings, where air has not moved properly in years. But beneath that was another smell, faint yet impossible to ignore. Something metallic. It reminded me of old coins, rust, or blood. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, even though I already had my flashlight in hand. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but only barely. The hospital seemed to swallow the light instead of reflecting it. I could make out old beds shoved against walls, overturned wheelchairs, broken cabinets, and pieces of medical equipment scattered across the floor. Dust lay thick on everything. Some doors hung half open, and others had fallen off their hinges completely. The building looked as though people had left in a hurry, abandoning things exactly where they were. That was the part that got to me first. It did not feel like a place that had simply closed. It felt interrupted. As I moved deeper inside, I found nurses' stations, treatment rooms, waiting areas, and offices that still had papers spread across the desks. In one room, I saw patient files left behind in open drawers and stacked folders. The sight of them made the whole place feel suddenly more real. These were not just walls and furniture. People had lived important, painful, desperate moments here. People had been scared here. People had suffered here. Maybe some had died here. Standing there in the dim beam of my flashlight, with the air smelling like rotten metal, that thought sat heavily in my chest. I kept going. At first, I told myself I was only going to explore the ground floor, and maybe part of the second. I never planned to stay until dark, and I definitely did not plan to take risks. But the deeper I went, the more I felt pulled in by the place. There was a silence inside the hospital that did not feel natural. It was too complete, too still, as if the building itself were listening. I made my way up to the second floor using a stairwell near the center of the building. The steps groaned under my weight, and every sound I made seemed much louder than it should have. On the second floor, the hallway stretched out long and narrow, lined with open doors leading into patient rooms. Some still had broken beds. Others had old curtains hanging in strips from their rails. In a few rooms, medical charts were still pinned to clipboards or left on counters. The paper yellowed with age. I was halfway down one of those hallways when I heard the footsteps. At first, I stopped and listened, trying to convince myself it had been the building settling, or the wind moving something loose. Old places make sounds. I know that. I have heard pipes shift, wood crack, glass rattle, and debris slide. But this was not that. These were footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy enough to be clear, but not heavy enough to sound rushed. They came from above me, I froze in the middle of the hallway and felt my heartbeat slam hard against my ribs. Every part of me went still. I listened again, and there they were. Another step, then another. Measured, almost careful. Not random, not accidental. It sounded like someone was walking on the floor above me. I remember feeling two things at once. Fear, obviously, but also immediate confusion. I had not seen another car outside. I had not heard anyone come in after me. The place had seemed completely empty. I stood there with my flashlight aimed upward like it could somehow shine through the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. Then the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard the steps again. Only this time they were moving, not across the floor above me anymore, but toward the stairwell, toward me. I slowly backed up until I could see the dark opening of the stairs. I held my breath and stared. The sound stopped just before it should have reached the top. I waited for someone to appear, for some local kid or another explorer to come into view and laugh at the way I was standing there frozen. No one came. I called out, asking if someone was there. My voice sounded weak in that building. It echoed once, and then was swallowed by silence. No answer came back. I should have left right then. Looking back now, that was the moment I still had a chance to walk away and maybe tell myself later that it had just been some trick of sound. But curiosity has always been my weakness. It gets stronger when it should disappear. The more wrong something feels, the more I want to understand it. So instead of leaving, I went toward the stairwell. Each step felt harder than the last. The flashlight shook slightly in my hand, and I hated that I could not keep it steady. The stairs leading up to the next floor were even darker than the ones I had used before. The beam of light only reached so far, leaving the landing above in deep shadow. I climbed slowly, listening after every step, but all I heard was my own breathing and the old building shifting around me. When I reached the top, I looked down the hallway. That is when I saw it. At the far end of the corridor stood a figure. I could not make out details. It was too far away, and the hallway was too dark. All I could see was the shape of something human-sized standing perfectly still. It was not moving. It was not swaying. It was not even breathing, at least not in any way I could see. It just stood there in the darkness, shaped like a person, but somehow emptier than one. Every instinct in me screamed to run. My whole body locked up. I could feel cold spreading down my arms and into my hands. I remember wanting to tell myself it was a coat rack, a broken curtain, some stacked equipment making a strange outline. But I knew better. I had spent enough time in places like that to recognize the difference between an object and a presence. And that thing was a presence. I do not know why I stepped forward instead of turning around. Maybe because I could not accept what I was seeing. Maybe because some stupid part of me still wanted a normal explanation. I took one slow step, then another. The flashlight beam stayed trained on the figure, but it did not reveal anything more. Then, without any sound at all, it was gone. Not moved, not walked away. Gone. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. No footsteps, no shifting shadow, no sound of a door, nothing. At that exact moment, my flashlight flickered. The beam flashed once, twice, and then cut out completely. The hallway dropped into full darkness. Those few seconds were some of the longest of my life. I stood there blind, gripping the flashlight so hard my hand cramped, trying not to panic. I smacked it against my palm and clicked it again and again until the beam finally came back. When it did, the hallway was empty. I did not stay to investigate. Every bit of curiosity I had was gone. I turned and ran. I went down the stairs too fast, nearly slipping, and rushed toward the entrance. My footsteps echoed wildly through the halls, and every sound made me feel like something was right behind me. I did not look back. I did not stop. I just kept moving. Then, I reached the main lobby. That was where I stopped dead. On one of the walls near the entrance were handprints, fresh handprints. They stood out clearly against the dusty, dirty wall. Dark, damp marks, as if someone had pressed both hands flat against the surface only moments before. I knew they had not been there when I came in. I would have noticed them, and I knew I had not touched that wall. I stared at them, and my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. There was no logical explanation that made sense anymore. Even if someone else had been inside, how had they moved so quickly without making a sound? Why had the prints looked so fresh in a place where everything else was coated in age and dust? Why had the air around them felt colder? I did not wait to think about it any longer. I bolted outside and did not stop until I reached my car. I fumbled with my keys so badly that it took me 2 tries to unlock the door. Once I got inside, I locked it immediately and looked up at the building. At first it looked empty again, just a dead hospital under a fading sky. Then I saw movement. In one of the broken windows on the upper floor, I thought I saw a shadow pass across the opening. It was quick, so quick that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. But I saw it. I drove home without stopping once. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole way. More than once I looked in the rearview mirror expecting to see headlights behind me, or some shape in the back seat. Of course, there was nothing. By the time I got home, it was dark. I locked every door and checked every window before I sat down. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hallway and that figure standing at the end of it. I kept replaying the moment my flashlight went out, remembering the complete darkness and the awful feeling that if the light had not come back, I would not have been alone in that hall for much longer. Around 3 a.m, my phone vibrated on the table beside me. The sound nearly made me jump out of my skin. I looked at the screen and saw that I had received a photo from an unknown number. For a second, I thought it was spam or some kind of wrong number. Then I opened it. It was a picture taken inside the hospital. I knew the hallway immediately, the same narrow hall, the same doors, the same darkness at the far end. And standing in the background was a figure. It was blurry, but unmistakable. The shape was there, human-like and still, exactly where I had seen it. I remember feeling all the air leave my lungs. I stared at the image for so long that my eyes started to water. My first thought was that someone had followed me, taken the photo as a prank, and somehow gotten my number. But even in that moment, I knew that explanation did not really satisfy me. It explained too little and raised too many other questions. Who had taken the photo? When? Why send it to me at 3 a.m? And if it was a prank, why did the figure in the picture look exactly like what I had seen before the flashlight died? I deleted the photo almost immediately. Then, I changed my number. I know that sounds extreme, but I could not stand the thought of that phone vibrating again, in the middle of the night, with another image from inside that building. I wanted to cut whatever connection there was, as fast as possible. I have not been back to the hospital since then, and I do not plan to return. I still try to reason with myself sometimes. I tell myself it was probably a person hiding in the building. I tell myself someone local saw my car, decided to scare me, and sent the picture to make the experience worse. I tell myself the handprints were old, and I just failed to notice them earlier. I tell myself the shadow in the window was my imagination. But the truth is, none of those explanations feel real when I am alone, because deep down, I know what I felt in that building. I know the silence was wrong. I know those footsteps were real. I know that figure was there. And I know something in that hospital noticed me the moment I stepped inside. Even now, when I drive past that area during the day, I feel my chest tighten. I catch myself glancing at the upper windows, half expecting to see someone standing there watching the road. Sometimes I think I see movement behind the broken glass, a shape passing from one room to another, a shadow lingering where there should be nothing at all. I always tell myself it is just the light, but I don't believe that anymore. There are places that feel empty because people left them behind. And then there are places that feel empty because something else moved in after. That hospital is one of those places. Whatever is inside it does not want to be found. I am sure of that now. It does not call out. It does not chase. It does not need to. It waits. It watches. It lets you come to it. And once you do, once you walk its halls and let it see your face, it does not forget you. That is the part that still unsettles me most. Not just that something was there, but that it wanted me to know it had seen me. The photo made that clear. The handprints made that clear. The figure standing at the end of the hall made that clear. It did not want to stay hidden completely. It wanted to be noticed. And I am certain of one thing now. Whatever is in that hospital may not want to be found, but it will always find a way to be seen.